That's right, it's finally here. I'm sure by now, at the time of this review, everybody's already finished the game, but I just could not help myself. Being able to see this franchise refreshed with modern graphics and excessive amounts of smoke and ray tracing tickles my pickle Oh wait, I can't make that joke. I'll just put it out there right now. The game is fun. It's almost as gory and adrenaline pumping as the original in 2008. Now the real question here though, is whether or not the original is better. Well, it's pretty clear they both got a lot of strengths and weaknesses, and I suppose that even though a remake is a remake, it's still worth talking about as its own individual game. After playing for about 11 to 12 hours on hard, I've got a few things to say myself as an avid Dead Space fan. And no, I'm not Vati on Dead Space lore, but this game brought me back to being the sci-fi nerd I was before they fucked up Star Wars. Looking at you. Okay, but you saw it. Enough. I'm getting sidetracked. I want to talk about the damn game already. But before I do, I gotta say, I am so fucking happy they brought back the original suit. It is beautiful. It's breathtaking. It's a deluxe edition exclusive. No, I'm just joking. I'm just kidding. Sorry about that. You did good, EA. I'm proud of you for doing the bare minimum. I know it must have been hard not to make it $30 DLC, but you did pretty damn well this time around. My precious memories can rest easy now. And with that being said, let's give me a reason to get on with this shit already. So first things first, are there any actual changes to the gameplay itself? Yeah, no, not at all. The game plays almost exactly the same as it did. The same limb-cutting, slow sprinting mechanics you were used to in Dead Space 1. In fact, a lot of the animations are pretty much the same too, including the QuickTime events, if only smoothed out by the improved motion capture. It even goes as far as to not let you cancel the reload animation to melee an enemy in front of you. One small change I did notice was in the melee itself, where there's no more parrying. In the original, you could actually parry necromorph spikes if you timed it right. In this game, meleeing seems to have much more of a punch and way more significance in regard to defending yourself. I've seen people, including myself, take down slashers solely by punching their Cronenberg spawn faces back to the space hell they came from. Something really awesome with the meleeing that I've noticed too is that Isaac sounds a lot more furious this time around. His punches and stomps have a much more raw feeling to them, almost as if he's pissed being on the Ishimura. Part of me actually hoped that for some chance they would bring back the Dead Space 2 stomping, where if you stomped enough times on the ground, Isaac would start cursing like a sailor. Now I know I said the game basically plays like how it used to, but it's to be noted there are a few quality of life changes. The most notable change to this game is the zero gravity portions. Let's be real, the original's way of handling zero gravity kinda sucked. It was the clunky little swan dive animation that sent you into a linear path. You had absolutely no control while you were mid-animation, thus prone to every possible attack that could be had. In this game, they actually brought back Dead Space 2 and 3 zero-gravity mechanics, where you instead have full control over Isaac's movements on where to take flight. And if there's one thing I have to say about this, thank you. Not only is it a vast improvement, but it looks cool as shit being able to fly around and kill these bastards. Also, something you may not have noticed, but depending on how low Isaac's health is, he has different executions for his lines. He'll sound as if he's in pain when his rig is red. This change was not needed at all, and I'm beyond myself at how crazy awesome it was that they added it. But if there is one huge gripe that I have, that honestly I'm not sure if anybody else had, the default sensitivity was garbage. Now I'll admit, I kind of had a hard time when it came to aiming in the beginning because it was so wonky. It felt too stiff to start up and too fast at full force, but this is a very minor inconvenience and I ended up getting used to it pretty quickly. And the best part about this game's controls is that you're not limited to the default layout. In fact, you can change it to the original game's controls or make an entirely new setup. They didn't have to do this at all, so the fact that it's here is truly a godsend feature that was implemented. I decided for my playthrough I would use DS2's layout because I was the most comfortable with it. Also, instead of finding schematics and buying them, the game just instead gives all the weapons to you. This is probably the first time I've used all the weapons in the game, as I was forced to due to very little resources. So overall, nothing too crazy in regard to the gameplay elements. You're pretty much getting the same formula that you got for the game that you fell in love with years ago. I gotta say, it's still fantastic, and boy, oh boy, is it satisfying. This is how you make a game that already looked amazing to begin with better. Taking one look at this is like seeing someone polish up a diamond. There is an unbelievably enormous amount of smoke that almost everywhere you go you will find. The lighting and sound design are second to none and immerse you in the grim atmosphere of the dead Ishimura. You feel helpless. You feel like you could become the ship's next victim. I can't wait to start going as a mindless Squidward-looking husk. There's not much to say here. This is probably the one section I have the least amount of complaints with. It's gorgeous, and it pays respect to the original game immensely. This game is what someone were to describe it looked like back then. Imagine seeing this in 2008. I'd be losing my mind. No complaints here. 10 out of 10 design. Except for, yeah, they kinda did some of these people dirty. Listen to me, before anything, all props to the actress who played Nicole. She absolutely killed it. My question from a gameplay perspective is more, why the change in particular? Canonically, Isaac is in his late 40s and Nicole is in her early 30s. So why does Isaac look like he's late for his intro to creative writing class at 10 p.m. Central Standard Time? This is Gunnar Wright. I'm not sure if it's just me, but this, and honestly even this, look a lot closer to Gunnar than this guy. His hair is borderline red and he's a bit too young looking, and only the real ones know exactly what they took from us. But this isn't actually enough for me to say the game's ruined. It's honestly more of just a smaller gripe than anything. But nevertheless, I'm not really too huge on the particular changes. The rest of the game though, absolutely fucking beautiful. So how much of this story is different from the original? It is a remake after all, so there's gotta be elements that stand out to it, right? Well, first of all, if you're new to Dead Space, let me give you a relatively spoiler-free rundown of the events leading up to Dead Space. If you want to find out through the game, feel free, but otherwise, spoilers. In the year 2508, Earth's natural resources are dwindling and humanity is on the brink of extinction due to overuse. As a result, big ships known as planet crackers would be created by the CEC to mine resources from other planets in order to keep Earth sustained. On the illegally taken 35th trip of the planet cracker known as the USG Ishimura, the ship's crew came across a planet known as Aegis 7, which was home to this relic known as the Marker, which is said to be the symbol of the Church of Unitology. Consequently, bringing the Marker on board begins to make the entire crew act differently as the ship members begin to hallucinate about dead family members and eventually start killing each other. On the colony that was mined as well as on the ship, these zombie-like alien creatures begin to form in large numbers by infecting the colonists and the Ishimura crew, turning them into more of these creatures known as necromorphs. Eventually, the Ishimura becomes home for infestation of murder, disease, and absolute gore. With no other choice as it seems it's either incarceration or death, the remaining survivors send a distress beacon in hopes that someone will come to rescue. I'm done. Enter Isaac Clarke, an engineer for the CEC and an absolute Chad among men. It's no doubt he walks so slow, his balls must be heavier than the weight of the entire game he's been carrying on his back since it started. We good? Fantastic. Now that you're all caught up, here's where the real spoilers begin. So, you know the drill. You gotta be quick though. No, I'm serious, hurry up. Hurry, quick, oh shit, oh no! Okay, so let me just get something real quick out of the way first. The first game had some phenomenal acting that was accompanied by the groundbreaking sound design for its time. The first hour of this game's acting is more than anything a nitpick for me, but some deliveries were just not there. It sounded a little too awkward or forced at certain points.
Isaac. Oh my god, Isaac. You made it.
They're everywhere. Shin, is he,
He's gone. Nothing I can do. What the fuck are these things?
I also, for some reason, didn't really get the impression that Isaac was at all scared. In the original, the protagonist was completely silent. Some people made the headcanon that this was because Isaac is in a constant state of shock, which honestly I find brilliant because it adds to the immersion factor of the game. I feel like Isaac just sorta knew what fighting necromorphs is like already. Kinda like in Dead Space 2. You can make the argument that it's not consistent because he was suffering from amnesiatic effects of the marker and whatnot, but he clearly remembers quite well what happened on the Ishimura in Dead Space 2. It wasn't his first tour. In this remake, it technically is. It wasn't a deal breaker though. The acting improved drastically as the game went on, and I truly felt like I was playing the lovable engineer of 2008. In fact, as cheesy as it was, there was one line at the end that I thought was delivered way too good. Anyways, for the actual story, last warning by the way. Okay, no mercy, here we go. I thought it was pretty good. I stand by the fact that the original trilogy is probably the best and most definitive way to experience Dead Space, but the remake is still very much worth checking out. There's some things I'm not too sold on, however, but again, little nitpicks. First of all, the way they get from point A to point B in this game is a little different from the original. For the most part, the game is the same. Your main objective is to get the fuck out of the doomed Ishimura by any means necessary. Whether it means bisecting and ripping your way through necromorph limbs or suffering all kinds of freaky side effects of the marker, you are getting out of there in one piece. Or barely, because this game on hard is nuts. I almost never had the issue of making space in my inventory because it's never filled up for shit. I will also say, some of these cutscenes, like when Matthias becomes a necromorph, was just downright unnecessarily amazing. It sells the horror this game tried to evoke a decade plus ago, and it made you feel like there was a desperation for your life. The story, just like the original, follows Isaac, Kendra Daniels, and Zach Hammond. However, Johnston and Chen are made into more significant characters. I understand why they made this change. It's to give your team a little more importance and really buy into the impact that losing them will have on you, since you guys are pretty much all you have left, but it really didn't do anything for me. In fact, after a while when I boarded the USM Valor, I was wondering if Hammond was going to die by a brute the way that he did in the original game, but instead it's Chen. Even after getting thrown out the airlock, somehow this motherfucker managed to make it through 80% of the story intact just to impale his commanding officer. Tough. And Johnston dies really early in the story anyway, so having her and Chen be significant characters was kinda pointless. Once again, I can sympathize with why they decided to go this route, but it just did not do a thing for me. I figured they were already going to die, and I really didn't bother having any attachment to them. It made sense to be more crushed if something happened to Hammond or Kendra because they're literally with you throughout the entire game while you're figuring your way out of this scrap heap. That sense of hope that they give you, knowing that they're alive and rooting for you as you make it to a new area to figure out new solutions on how to escape, really sold it and really made me attached to those characters to begin with. So Kendra and Zach are still very much awesome characters. There's a lot less condescending words from Kendra from what I can see in this game. Nothing compared to the berating of every second. Now Mercer is pretty much the same sadistic fucked up madman he's always been, but this time around he feels a lot more like a super villain. It felt a little weird, but honestly this makes the most sense out of all the characters and the way that they were handled because he's kind of fucked up. For a lot of people, him getting killed as opposed to in the first game where he lets himself become a necromorph will probably get mixed feelings, but trust me, I get it. Nothing felt better than seeing Elton John get impaled by a pillar on top of Atlantis. Kyne's change by far annoyed me the most though. In the first game you really get the impression that he's a doctor first and a unitologist second, and I was convinced he cared about his work and others. He really didn't want to be swayed by the marker no matter how hard Amelia got stuck into his head. In this game he seems more like he just made a last minute decision and said fuck it, I want out of this rock. I also just really prefer the character model in the original. He's got that wise, aged look to him that made me want to trust him. So when Isaac told this guy off, I really got it. The most enormous change by far has to be putting Elizabeth Cross and Jacob Temple as actual living characters in this story. This conflicts me a lot. Honestly, the beauty of these characters came from the logs themselves. You would hear Jacob Temple holding down the fort with his surviving crewmates and Cross and really admire their tenacity to endure and survive such a tragic, surprising event nobody could have expected. It made me want to collect all the logs in the original so I could figure out their fates even though it was pretty obvious where it was all going. This makes it so much more tragic when you find out that they were about to make it out together until Mercer decides to murder them both in cold blood for the sake of unitology. They're instead characters that are pretty integral to the main story now. They're still around and they're still fighting for their lives, only Cross dies much later and in a very original way, I suppose. I can definitely commend the game for the route it ended up taking, but I was just so astonished that they were able to make Temple seem like such a Chad in the original without even ever truly giving him a main story role. But I have to admit, like I said before, the fact that Nicole was cross the entire time really made me commend the creativity. He and Isaac both thinking that they were each other's significant other the entire time really makes for a wild plot twist and truly makes you appreciate how the word remake can actually do something other than just apply a fresh coat of paint to an already established game. Also, this guy.
This is USM Valor, broadcasting on all frequencies to USG.
So after the countless trials, the unsurmountable numbers of death witnessed, the betrayal that still stings like salt in an open wound, and nothing but your newfound will to survive, we get to the ending. Each is 7, and we all know why we're here.
Isaac.
Oh yeah, this boss battle still fucks hard. I'm pretty sure it's a little different, and I honestly found it somewhat easier than the first time around. In fact, I was a little disappointed because, I mean, it went too fast for me. But just look at this. From the gorgeous background of the Omen planet to the colossal size of a massive threat that seems almost unable to beat, and... I'm sorry, I just had to put that in there. This shit still hits. This boss makes you feel like you're about to finally end this nightmare or finally succumb and become a victim to it. This is how you do a final boss. Great work, guys. Okay, let's talk about the ending for a second. Is it pretty much the same? Yeah. But is it as impactful? I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I do not personally think so. It may have the same formula, but it just doesn't hit quite as hard. Get ready for nitpicks. For 1, you already know what's gonna happen. 2, the first game really made you feel like, holy shit, this is finally the end. A nightmare I never thought would be over has finally subsided. It was a bittersweet ending, and I personally feel like the soundtrack had a lot to do with it. Jason Graves is now a composer that I have a lot of respect for, and I would honestly even put him up there with Lorne Balfe and Hans Zimmer. It really crushed me when I didn't hear the soundtrack play when Isaac escaped Aegis 7. It fully established that the journey was over. I mean, just listen to this.
Isaac, it's me. I wish I could talk to you.
And then, of course, Nicole hallucinations happen. There's something about the lack of frames in the original that makes seeing the twist so much more terrifying. The original really killed it in how you do a proper jump scare. This game just did not have the same effect for me. The scene dragged out a bit longer and it gave you some time to prepare, whereas the original just sort of sprung it on you. It was something that people remembered for so long and made them long for a sequel, so honestly, this ending was very compared to the original. But let's take a minute and talk about that other ending for a second. Holy shit. Not only do you get the foam finger from Dead Space 2 as a sick reward for completing the game on Impossible, but this ending for finishing New Game Plus and collecting all the markers is downright nuts. Probably the most creative, jaw-dropping thing the developers of this game have done. This perfectly sets up the sequel, since in Dead Space 2 it's implied that Isaac himself built a marker. This is so gruesomely unsettling that I can't even bring myself to watch it again. I watched it once and shivered in fear. The marker's influence has finally taken hold of Isaac and has succumbed to now doing its bidding. He's freakishly happy, more happy than anybody was throughout the entirety of the game, and for once, we don't like happiness here. This completely makes up for the lack of impact that the normal ending had. Y'all nailed this one, guys. I will never sleep again. So overall, I'd say this story does its job well and stays relatively true to the original game. It's got solid foundation, and all the new stuff they decided to add to it didn't actually take away anything from the original game. The lore of the characters are relatively all the same, and everything continues to play out as it did long ago. Honestly, guys, just like how I said in the beginning, there's not much I can say other than go pick this shit up, man. The game's sick. It'll make you feel just as helpless and scared for your life as the original did. You might even find yourself saying,
I'm the Dead Space.
Yeah.
and yes, while it didn't do much for me in the fear factor since I already knew what to expect, it still hits, and anybody who wants to get into Dead Space can still have a really good time with this one. But once again, I highly recommend just playing the original games first. That is the true experience in my opinion. And I'd even go as far as to say watch Dead Space Downfall before you play the games. It's got no spoilers for the first installment, and you can check it out for free on YouTube. So make it happen, bro. I'll know. Trust me. But as for the remake, goddamn Motive, you killed it. You guys better work on Dead Space 2, and if you can, please make it as close to the source material as possible. It's the best sequel that this series has, and I really want it to be the absolute best it can. And one last thing real quick. No, I don't think the Callisto Protocol is better, and I don't think this game is better than the original Dead Space. They're all their own games, and they should be appreciated individually. Everybody gets a round of applause from me. The remake's a 9. Go buy it. Go tell your friends to start playing Dead Space. Go set a second mortgage on your home, buy 50 copies of the game, and force everybody you know to play it. I am so hyped up now to see what this studio accomplishes. I hope we can get some DLC for this game too. Although I'm mostly excited for the sequel, it would be awesome to see some Jacob Temple DLC or something awesome like that before the Ishimura gets boarded by the Callian. Kinda like Dead Space Extraction, that one was a pretty good prequel. Let me know your thoughts. I would love to get a conversation going. Feel free to check out my other stuff. Guess you guys liked it enough for me to keep making more, so I'll see what we can do as time goes on. Your love and support is very much appreciated. I hope you have a sick day, and wherever you are, more importantly,
make us whole again.